Could an entire government be put on trial for its crimes? The Nuremberg Trials were not just about finding justice, but about creating new laws that held even the most powerful leaders accountable. The air in the courtroom was thick with the scent of old wood, dust, and a palpable tension that seemed to crackle with an unseen electricity. This was Courtroom 600 of the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg, Germany. A city once the spiritual heart of the Nazi movement, now a stage for the final, most audacious act of a world war that had claimed tens of millions of lives. The date was November 20th, 1945. The war had been over for only 6 months, its wounds still raw, its horrors still fresh in the global consciousness. A long, narrow bench held the accused. 21 men, a rogues gallery of the Third Reich's surviving leadership. They sat in 2 rows, their expressions a mixture of defiance, disbelief, and grim acceptance. The man at the head of the first row, Hermann Göring, once the flamboyant head of the Luftwaffe, now seemed a pale shadow of his former self, his bluster replaced by a calculating sneer. This was not a trial of a single man, but an unprecedented effort to try an entire regime, a system of government, a pervasive ideology. It was history's first and greatest international military tribunal. The world watched with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Could justice be found in the ashes of a defeated nation? Could laws, frail and abstract things, hold accountable a machine of terror that had devoured a continent? This was no ordinary legal proceeding. It was a courtroom drama on a scale never before imagined, a true crime saga where the victims were entire peoples and the evidence was a mountain of documents and a sea of unspeakable suffering. The prosecution's lead, the American Robert H. Jackson, rose to speak. He was a man of quiet authority, his words not a bellow of rage, but a chilling, methodical indictment. He began by laying out the case against the men, not for simple war crimes, but for something new and profound. Crimes against peace, for initiating a war of aggression, and crimes against humanity, for the systematic extermination of millions. This was the first great twist, the reveal that this trial was not just about the rules of war, but about a new principle of justice. The very act of starting a war was now a crime. It was a legal innovation that would leave academics, legal experts, and historians dazed and thinking for generations to come. As the days turned into weeks, the courtroom became a theater of the macabre. The prosecution, a collection of jurists from the Allied powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union, presented their case with painstaking detail. They introduced evidence that, in its sheer volume and depravity, seemed to defy comprehension. They showed films taken by Allied soldiers of the liberation of the concentration camps, skeletal figures behind barbed wire, mountains of human hair, and the silent, unblinking horror of the gas chambers. The emotional resonance of these cinematic descriptions was overwhelming. The judges, the journalists, even the defendants themselves were confronted with the undeniable, visual proof of what had been done. The accused men, many of whom claimed ignorance or mere obedience to orders, were forced to watch, their faces projected onto a large screen in the courtroom. It was a cruel, necessary mirroring of their souls. This was where the trial transcended law and entered the realm of the human spirit. The pacing was masterful, moving from the slow, deliberate rhythm of legal arguments to the sudden, gut-wrenching shock of photographic and film evidence. And then came the witness testimonies. The first to take the stand was a man named Otto Ohlendorf, a high-ranking SS officer. He calmly, dispassionately recounted the killings of thousands of people by his Einsatzgruppen or mobile killing squads. He described the process of marching men, women, and children into pits and machine gunning them with a chilling, bureaucratic detachment. His words were a poetic language of horror, a cold recitation of statistics that represented shattered lives. For the audience, the true crime fans and students of history, this was the unblinking gaze into the heart of darkness they craved, but the reality was far more terrifying than any fictional narrative. Here was the truth, unadorned and unapologetic. If you're finding this deep dive into the legal and moral complexities of the 20th century as compelling as we are, and want to explore more hidden histories and forgotten tales, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps us bring these stories to life. The trial's narrative had a constant underlying tension. Each defendant's plea was a new twist, a desperate attempt to create an alternate reality. The common refrain was, "I was just following orders." The defense attorneys, many of them German, were tasked with the impossible job of representing men who had overseen the most monstrous of crimes. The prosecution systematically dismantled this defense, arguing that a soldier, a government official, or a bureaucrat had a moral and legal obligation to disobey an order that was manifestly criminal. This was another major twist for the audience. The revelation that individual accountability was the core principle of this new kind of justice. The Nuremberg Trials established that obedience to an unlawful command was not a valid excuse. The very concept of international law was being forged in this courtroom, one witness and one document at a time. There were moments of high drama and psychological warfare. Hermann Göring, the most senior official on trial, played a dangerous game. He was a man who had once been second only to Hitler, and he believed he could use the trial as a political platform. He was an eloquent, and at times, a frighteningly persuasive speaker, mocking the prosecution, debating with them on military strategy and political philosophy. He was the perfect villain for this cinematic epic. His verbal duels with the American chief prosecutor Robert Jackson were legendary. Göring presented himself not as a monster, but as a loyal soldier and a patriotic statesman, a twisted parody of a tragic hero. This was the part of the story that would hook the binge watchers and mystery fans, the cat-and-mouse game between prosecutor and defendant, the psychological breakdown of the accused. The prosecution also unveiled what could be considered a lost technology of a different, more chilling kind. They presented documentation of the Nazi T4, or T4 euthanasia program, a secret and systematic effort to kill disabled Germans, and the sinister bureaucratic efficiency of the concentration camps. They showed ledgers detailing the exact number of victims gassed and cremated at Auschwitz-Birkenau. This was a form of technology, the use of bureaucracy and logic to carry out genocide that was as terrifying as any futuristic weapon. The methodical, almost mundane nature of the record-keeping brought home the scale of the horror more effectively than 1,000 emotional testimonies. This was the dark underbelly of human organization, the perversion of intellect and order for the purpose of mass murder. The final dazing twist of the Nuremberg Trials came not from a revelation of guilt, for that was never in doubt, but from the complex and often surprising verdicts. The court, made up of judges from 4 different nations with 4 different legal traditions, issued a ruling that was not monolithic. 3 men were acquitted, their roles deemed not significant enough to warrant conviction. 3 were given life sentences. 12 were sentenced to death by hanging. The verdicts were not unanimous, reflecting the very real debates behind closed doors. The Soviet judge dissented, arguing for the conviction of all the accused. The French and American judges debated the nuances of command responsibility. This lack of a perfect, unanimous verdict was a powerful final scene, a reminder that justice, even on this scale, is a human endeavor. Messy, imperfect, and subject to disagreement. It was not a clear-cut fairy tale ending, but a nuanced, complex conclusion that left the audience, the academics, the students, the researchers with more questions than answers. The Nuremberg Trials were not the end of the story, but a new beginning, a blueprint for international law and human rights, born from the ruins of a global catastrophe. They established that a man could not hide behind a nation's sovereignty to commit a crime against humanity, a principle that continues to resonate today. They were a testament to the fact that even in the face of unimaginable evil, the pursuit of justice is not only possible, but necessary. And there you have it. The true story of the Nuremberg Trials. A landmark event that was part legal proceeding, part political thriller, and part chilling true crime documentary. From a courtroom in a broken city, a new form of justice was forged in the shadow of unspeakable crimes. If you were as captivated by this story as we were, and want to delve deeper into the forgotten moments and untold stories of history, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We're going to unearth more historical mysteries and forgotten heroes, one episode at a time.